Started here, and I've got right at the top of the hour right now. So if you're ready, then I guess we'll go ahead and kick it off.
Yes, sounds
So
good.
for those joining us, my name is Garret Biss. I want to thank you very much for taking a couple of moments of your evening and joining us for this live presentation tonight. We're doing a couple things that are new for both of us, so we're really excited to utilize or leverage this technology to to kind of reach out, share some of the work that we do, share some ideas that we know will help and inspire you. So we're excited to do this, and we're excited that you took some time to join us tonight. So my name is Garret Biss. A little bit of my background: I retired from the Marine Corps in 2015, and then spent most of the last 3 years studying human potential with a mentor, Jack Canfield. Went through a certification process as a certified human potential trainer, and then more recently, went through a certificate of applied positive psychology program through the Flourishing Center out of Penn, up in Pennsylvania. So it was through that program that I met the wonderful Miss Monica Smith and learned a little bit about the work that she was doing, and was really drawn into the way that she was taking this applied positive psychology and using it with her work in addiction recovery, both as a professional recovery coach and in some programs that she's created, which I'll let her tell you a little bit more about. But it really inspired me and showed me how much, made me realize how much passion I had for the work that I've been doing, and the ability to use that work to help people that are either struggling with substance abuse, struggling or living in active addiction, or living in recovery. And that's where I really find the work that I do, and the information, the content that I've come across, a lot of the resources I've come across. I feel like that's where they can make the biggest difference, is helping people that are living in recovery to live into their true potential. There's a lot of things that stack the deck against people that have faced substance abuse or addiction in their past. And a lot of those things take their toll on self-esteem and on somebody's self-efficacy and on their feeling of worth and their ability to kind of show up and live into their potential. And that ultimately affects the way that they can enjoy life. And I think all of us, no matter our past, deserve to enjoy a happy, fulfilling, and successful life. And it pains me to see how many people that are very capable and have a lot of potential that just don't realize it and don't live into it. So that's kind of what drew me into this work, and in some of these presentations that I'm putting together. That's kind of really what's excited me. And if you have any more questions about any of the work that I do, always feel free to reach out at any time. But I would like to give Monica a chance to introduce herself and maybe a little bit about the work that you do.
Yep, thanks, Garret. Hey guys, hey Tim. Let's see, I didn't prepare for my introduction. So, yep, my name's Monica, as Garret mentioned. I want to thank Garret. I'm losing my Facebook Live virginity right now. So I'm like super nervous, but definitely appreciate everybody watching. I appreciate Garret inviting me to do this. In terms of my background, I've spent a career in the consulting field, but also in the background got my master's in forensic psychology, and later years certified as a recovery coach, as Garret mentioned, addiction recovery coach, and then did the same program that Garret mentioned in applied positive psychology, and certified resilience trainer. And I've had a personal recovery journey myself over the last 10 years or so, and started to, as I was kind of going through all these programs, I realized that there was so much research that is not, I didn't come across it in my recovery journey. It hasn't really made its way fully into the recovery world yet. And I think it's starting to, which is great, but I became really passionate about just getting some other research out there that I think can really help. And mindset is a huge piece of that. So I'm really excited. I'm just excited to be here and talk about it.
Very cool. So Monica and I, we kind of got together on the phone a couple of weeks ago, and we're thinking, what can we take from all that we've learned in the 6 months of positive psychology curriculum and all the other work that we've done? Like, what's one thing that we could offer that would really make the biggest difference by itself? And it was kind of a no-brainer that this topic of growth mindset, or comparing growth versus fixed mindset, is really fundamental to anything that you could hope to do to be successful in recovery, or to be really successful and happy in your own life, because it really lays the foundation for it. It's a critical element of every recovery program that I'm familiar with, every philosophy of success and happiness that I'm familiar with. So, and it was kind of a no-brainer for us that we would offer this as our first of many, hopefully, the first of many joint live Facebook Lives or webinars. So what we're going to talk about tonight is growth mindset. And we'll start out by defining what a mindset is and the difference between growth and fixed mindset. And then talk about how you can distinguish in your own life when those fixed mindset thoughts or that fixed mindset shows up, or when your growth mindset shows up. And then we'll talk about some ways that you can bring, kind of cultivate your growth mindset, if you will, or help develop your growth mindset, flex your growth mindset muscle so that you can have those experiences that you want and that you certainly deserve. And then, what we really want to do and what we want to leverage this technology for is the ability to communicate and to answer some questions. You have a very rare opportunity to sit down with a professional recovery coach and answer some questions that you have and get some feedback, and we can just kind of continue the discussion. So any questions that you have that come up, please jot them down. You can drop them in the comments, and we'll spend some time at the end really answering your questions. That's kind of the rundown for tonight. As I mentioned, there is a worksheet. There's a download. It's in the event page. There's a link that you can use to download it. It's in the description for this video. So if you want to take a moment and download it, it's really just 4 pages, and it's some great notes, some great takeaways, and then some exercises that you can do after this presentation to help bring that growth mindset not only into your life, but into anybody that you any loved ones or friends that you have that are struggling in their life. Like, how can you use what you know and what you'll learn tonight about growth mindset to help them in some way? So we'll kick it off with really just defining mindset. So mindset is a set of beliefs or a way of thinking that determines one's actions, their behaviors, their outlook, and really their mental attitude. So when we talk about mindset, we typically think of either a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And what a fixed mindset typically is this thought process that you really are who you are. You have a certain level of intelligence, a certain amount of skill, and there's nothing you can really do to change it. Maybe you can learn a couple new things, but you yourself is not really going to change. And when we see this showing up in our life, we look at the successes or the failures that we have, and we use that in a fixed mindset to get a definition of who we are. If we compare that to a growth mindset is of the true understanding that our intelligence level, our skills, our knowledge, our abilities, our capabilities, these are not things that are set in stone. And even if we struggle with something, or if we fail at something one time, it doesn't mean that we'll always fail at that. We always have the ability to learn new skills, to grow, to strengthen, and to perform differently in the future than we have in the past. And when we look at some different areas where mindsets show up, we can really kind of compare and contrast the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. If you have downloaded that worksheet, then you'll see on there's a wonderful chart that kind of goes through, and I'll mention some of them, but it goes through some different areas where the mindset shows up and how it looks. So in the area of focus, when we focus on the events that happen in our life, if we have a fixed mindset, then we judge them as an outcome. So if we have a failure, that would define us. So if I go out and I try to play baseball and I'm terrible at baseball, or I drop the ball, or I miss, I'm at the bat and I miss the opportunity to hit a strikeout, well then I would, if I had a fixed mindset, then I would use that to define my understanding of myself and think that I'm just terrible at baseball, and that's it. It'll never change. In recovery, if you've had problems in recovery, if you've relapsed before, or if you have not been as successful as you wanted to be, not progressed through your program as quickly as you wanted to, you might take that as a definition of who you are. But it doesn't. Coming from a growth mindset, we realize that that's not who we have to be forever or in the future. Growth mindset, when we look at those events in our life, we realize that every event that we have, every failure, every setback, every win, every success is a process. And if we go through the wins that we have, we can learn from those and we can become better in the future and perform better in the future. Same thing with our failures. If we fail at something today, we can still gain from that. We can still learn from that and use it to perform better in the future. And that's the next thing on the chart, if you're following along, is what does a failure mean? If we fail from a fixed mindset, if we have that fixed mindset and we fail, then we use that as an identity to identify us. We might think that, you know, I'm not talented enough, I'm not skilled enough, I'll never be good at this thing. Whereas from a growth mindset, if we can cultivate that growth mindset, we realize that a failure is just a single event and it's a, you know, a one-time action. But we realize that with greater effort, a little bit more time, maybe learning a couple more things, that we can change and we can perform better in the future or the next time. What do you think about that, Monica? Anything to say about just kind of the basic definition of growth mindset, or how it shows up, or the differentiating between the two?
Yeah. So I think, you know, I don't know if people have heard of Peter Sage. He's one of these entrepreneurs that has started like 17 million businesses, and some of them have failed and some of them have made him billions and whatever. So I just happened to hear him talking the other day, and I thought he had a really interesting idea of sort of this what mindset is concept. And he talked about the difference between context and content. And the way he described that was that the content of our lives is inside of a glass. So that's, you know, our relationships, our job, our, you know, whatever our issues are. And then the glass is the context that holds everything. It's the container. And I was really struck by his point was we spend a lot of time really zeroed in on the content of our life, and we stir it up, you know, oh, got to change this. Oh, maybe it's that, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And we just kind of keep shifting the content around, and really we're not realizing that if we don't change the context that we're seeing the content in, if we don't change the glass that we're seeing it through, then we're going to end up with the same results. So, you know, that was something that was helpful for me to think about in terms of context versus content. And what helps me really distinguish between what a fixed versus a growth mindset, kind of really simplify what the difference between the two. They talk about fixed is about proving and growth is about improving. So from a fixed mindset place, it's very much focused on, as you mentioned, the outcome, and a growth mindset's focused on the effort. So the challenge here, and particularly as it, you know, relates to recovery, in recovery we talk about learning to focus on controlling what we can and to sort of minimize how many times we're trying to control what we can't. And we all do that, even people who aren't in recovery or who don't struggle with addiction. We all, how many times a day do we try to control things we have no control over?
Sure.
We're pissed off about traffic and the weather and what our mother said, and, you know, all this stuff, right? We can't control other people's behavior. So when we get ourselves stuck in outcome focused thinking, it creates anxiety, because we really don't have control over it, but we sort of kid ourselves into thinking we do, instead of really shifting into how can I focus on the effort? Because the effort's what I can contribute one way or the other. The outcome's going to be what it is. And if it doesn't go my way, I'll learn from it. But if it's all about what you're looking at, right? What you think about and what you look
Sure.
at expands.
Sure.
And you know, I think the challenge, so how this, I guess how this concept of the difference between these two mindsets plays out for me in terms of a recovery perspective is, you know, I think in general, I think it's come a long way and it's coming a long way, but we sort of do have a fixed mindset about recovery in general, about addiction in general, right? And,
Sure.
you know, the whole brain
That's what really feeds into so much of
debate.
that stigma, and you know, and the outside pressure,
Exactly.
people that just don't understand and make judgments, and you know, certain, you know, throw certain labels at, or put people in a certain, you know, a certain place because they just don't really understand, and with that fixed mindset, not being willing to kind of see things from a new perspective can really make, you know, create negative effects.
Right, exactly. And, you know, in terms of sort of this idea of proving versus improving, or judging versus learning. So that's another, you know, really easy distinguishing factor between the two mindsets is, am I looking at my life? Am I looking at other people? Am I looking at myself and judging it? Am I judging myself? Am I judging other people, or am I trying to learn?
Yeah.
Am I trying to grow? Am I figuring out what lesson I can take? And I think the thing that's important, and another thing that's important to point out, is we can have different mindsets for different pieces of our lives. We are great
Right.
at compartmentalizing. So we like to pretend our life is neat waffle squares, but it's really spaghetti. But anyway, we think it's all separate. So
Yeah.
our work selves, you know, we can have a growth mindset about ourselves at work and a fixed mindset about ourselves in our relationship, or
Mhm.
you know, you can have multiple mindsets, which makes it even more complicated. But I think I think the more we can identify that there are two, and what they sound like in our head and what they look like in our behavior, it's amazing how much it might shift, how much it shifts things when you realize, like, oh my God, listen to how the chatter sounds in my head.
Sure.
It's very, it's very deterministic. It's very limited. It's very
Mhm.
judgy. Like, and we all are judgy, kind of. We all judge.
Yeah,
I mean,
certainly.
this is Byron Katie. I love this. She's one of my favorite authors, and she's like,
Right.
look, people judge. Like, that's just what it
Yeah.
is. But
Sure.
if we can kind of get a handle on it, or at least hear it a little bit, then I think it makes a difference. It really does. I'm
Yeah, that's
rambling, but
no,
those are
no,
my
absolutely.
those are
Which
my
is
thoughts.
why, this is such a great topic to talk about because I think, just that awareness of it, awareness that there is a difference can really empower people to recognize that voice in their head and say, oh, I just caught that. That was a fixed mindset thought. But having that awareness, so then they can make that change because without awareness, then there's nothing that we can do. So for those that are watching, now you really understand why I was so excited to invite Monica to join me because she's just, a wealth of knowledge and very brilliant. So you see me looking down, I'm sitting here taking notes myself of all these things that, the ideas that are coming to me and things that I'm learning. So maybe this is more for
You're
me
making me
than
hot
for you.
now. Now I'm hot.
Yeah. Oh, you'll be fine. Um, Good thing we did all that chest run stuff earlier today. But I love your point about the fact that we can have fixed and growth mindsets in different areas of our life. And what I thought of when you were saying that is I can remember, previously in my career especially when I was in the military, I had a fixed mindset about my military profession. And my fixed mindset was just that, I was good. It came easy to me. I would perform well, as a pilot or as my job. And my fixed mindset about other things in my life, particularly, relationships in my life or finances in my life. I had a fixed mindset that I wasn't so good at that. And when we kind of come to that place, then I tended to lean more into my profession in those places where I identified myself as good and just avoided and forgot about those. Well, didn't forget about them because that's where all the panic attacks and stress and anxiety was coming from, but tried to forget about those things in my life where I had a fixed mindset that I wasn't that great or I wasn't doing well. But I think recognizing the fact that, kind of cultivating or capturing that growth mindset in those areas that we don't identify as being well or performing well can really be empowering because now I don't have to avoid it because I can change it. I don't just have to avoid it forever or numb that or escape from those thoughts and that anxiety and that stress from that area of my life. I can actually focus on it for a short period of time, grow, develop some new skills, develop some new talent, and now it's not going to be that elephant in the room or that area of stress. Same thing can be, for areas of recovery. If there's certain things in your recovery that are helping you thrive and that you're really doing well in, and there's areas that are terrible for you, maybe, whether it's relationships or whatever pocket of your life that is terrible or that is really not helping you in your recovery, you don't have to avoid it forever because avoiding it is only going to create extra stress and anxiety and make the recovery a harder experience. So if you can take that growth mindset and focus on those areas where, you feel like there's a deficit or you feel like there's a void, then you can, kind of better that or improve that area. So it doesn't always have to be, that thorn in your side or that area of, that stress and that pain. So
Yeah, and I
great
think,
points on that.
oh, yeah, and I was going to say, I think that to your point, I mean, a lot of this really just comes down to, like, what glasses are we wearing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you think about growth, this growth mindset, are, blue glasses, and fixed mindset are green glasses, then the reality is that whatever glasses you're wearing, everything's blue or everything's green. And you can move your furniture around all you want. You can get a different job. You can shift anything you want in your
Sure.
environment, but if you're wearing your green glasses or your blue glasses, it's all still going to be green or blue.
Right.
So it's really about stepping back from the weeds of life, which is where we all get caught up,
Mhm.
and asking yourself, like, what is like going on in my head right now, and is that green or blue? I mean, whatever it is, like, what is the voice? Which voice is it? And the recovery example of this is the idea of feeding the right wolf. So, for those of you who haven't
Sure.
heard that, I know many people that are familiar with recovery have heard that, but it's this idea that we each have these two wolves inside of us, and one wolf is, well, we're just going to say for this, one's fixed and one's growth, but it can be one's peace and acceptance and love, and one is anger and and rage and, you know, all this stuff. And they both serve a purpose, right? Because the angry wolf wants to protect us and keep us safe from harm. But the problem is that every choice we make, every thought we have, every decision we make, every interaction we have, we're either feeding the good or the bad wolf. And whichever wolf we feed most often gets stronger and the other one starves. So that's the battle we constantly have going on in our head. And one of the people in one of my meetings a long time ago had used to call it the itty bitty shitty committee in her head. And, you know, she really had to like take a step back and be like, whoa, like the committee's super loud today. Like what's going on with that? Right. And realize like, just because it's going on in my head doesn't mean I have to believe it. You know, doesn't mean I have to buy into it. And yeah, there are going to be days that it's louder than other days. Maybe I didn't get enough sleep. Maybe I didn't do my self-care routine, whatever it is, but I don't have to buy into it. I can just hear it and say like, yeah, I know, I hear you, whatever. Sure. So I think a lot of it's just figuring out how we can feed more of the growth as much as possible. And the first step to that is just recognizing the chatter, really.
Sure, absolutely, and identifying it as something that's serving you, or you know, or detrimental to you. You're, you know, feeding that sickness, or feeding your growth and feeding your health. So just to kind of recap on the difference between fixed and growth mindsets, if you're looking at your worksheet, I think you'll see these down a little ways, but there's some example dialogue of kind of that internal talk that goes on in your head, you know. As your fixed mindset says, you know, as you approach a challenge, for example, your fixed mindset might say, are you sure that you can do it? Maybe you don't have enough talent. Maybe you're not good enough. You know, maybe you, Monica, had some voices in your head saying, are you sure you can do that Facebook Live? Like maybe you're not good enough. Maybe you can't figure it out. Yes. But if you can identify that, dial that back a little bit, listen to your growth mindset, it would say something like, you know, I'm not sure I can do it now, but I know with enough time and effort, maybe giving that one try, maybe just a little bit more experience, and it's not going to be so foreign, and I'll be comfortable with it, and I'm sure that I can do it before. Because remember, there's things that I didn't know how to do before, and eventually I learned how to do them, and now, you know, now it's kind of a part of the skill set of the talents that I have. But growth, so fixed mindset, and really focusing on failure, because I think it's our failures that take the biggest chunk out of our self-esteem and our self-efficacy and make the biggest impact on what it is that we're willing to try, and the things that we're willing to take on in our life. And about self-esteem real quick, the reason that self-esteem plays such an important role in our life is because if you have good self-esteem, then you're willing to take risks, you're willing to try things, you're willing to put yourself out there and experience a couple failures, a couple setbacks. And every time you experience a failure, it might take a little bit of your self-esteem. But if you think of self-esteem as, you know, as a bank account, and you have a whole lot of self-esteem worth in your bank account, then you're willing to make little risks. You're willing to take some chances. But if you have very low self-esteem because of the failures that you've had, and you have a fixed mindset, and those failures have told you over time and again that you are not good, you have no talent, you have no skill, you have no value, you're not worth it, then you're going to have very little you know, self-esteem worth in your bank account. So you're not going to try things, and you'll never experience successes or make growth or experience new and better things in your life if you don't reach out and try some things. So if you're not willing to try things because you think that you are a failure, you identify yourself as a failure, you think that you will fail, then you're not going to try those things, you'll not experience that growth, and you will continue to fail. We'll talk in a moment about self-fulfilling prophecies, but that's really what it feeds into. On the other hand, if you have a growth mindset, or if you come from a growth mindset and you have a healthy self-esteem, then that failure, in your mind, you don't identify as a failure when you fail. You say, I just wasn't successful yet. And Carolyn Dweck, who did a lot of work with the fixed and growth mindset, she said that's the most powerful word and empowering word in our vocabulary is the word yet. It's not that I'm not good, period. It's not that, you know, I failed, period. It's that I haven't succeeded yet, or I'm not good yet, but it doesn't mean that I won't be in the future. And I think just putting that yet, some people, you know, put the semicolon at the end of the sentence just to indicate that the sentence is going to go on. Life does go on. And, you know, the end of the sentence or the end of the experiences doesn't have to be defined by however it started. Any thoughts on that? And then before we chat a little bit about self-fulfilling prophecy and how this stuff really shows up and plays out in our life?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly, I think that's a really good summary. And in terms of just thinking about how did this play out, how does this play out with us, and how did it play out for me? So I can remember in early, getting into my early recovery journey, and, you're peeling back the onion. So you're starting to learn all these things about yourself. And in some ways it's like good because you're like, oh, well, that's why I did all these things, or, that it makes sense. But then it's all, you have this freak out, like, oh my God. And I remember saying, oh my God, is this who I am? Like, oh my God, is this also who I am? Like, what is
Yeah.
all this stuff that I didn't? And I can remember my therapist being like, who do you want to be, Monica? Like, okay, like, why don't you ask yourself that? And I just was so busy focused on, you know, like trying to figure out, is this my identity? Am I this person that has all these issues and that's the way it's going to always be? And I can remember having thoughts like, oh my gosh, this is how I'm always going to be now. This is who I am now. And a big one for me was, and this is a very fixed mindset thing, as we talked about judgment. Others are going to judge me, and if you go, I went into this self-preservation mode, and therefore I can't be vulnerable. I have to hide. I have to withdraw. I have to protect. And as we know, vulnerability is the antidote to shame. It's the most healing thing any of us can do. We are like in a vulnerability crisis in our world right now. And the challenge is that mindset of fear, that mindset of no, I have to protect what I have, is the opposite. It basically so anyway, so that was one thing I wanted to say. I remember thinking a lot, it's supposed to be easier by now. Like, I've been working on myself for all this time. Why am I still struggling? Why is it still hard? I'm not supposed to be struggling anymore. And that's a big one. I think
Sure.
we all can get into this habit of thinking that the goal that we think the goal is to eliminate negative experience, like to minimize negative feelings and experiences, right? It's easy to say, like, of course, that's what we don't want to experience that stuff anymore. But I have realized the goal is to build my capacity to tolerate it. The
Love
goal
that.
is I'm building capacity,
Yeah.
right?
Love the way
So
Louis Solaro said. I don't know if you ever saw in one of the videos for on the Flourishing Center. He says, positive psychology is not about just going around and being positive all the time. Positive
right.
psychology is about building that well of compassion for ourselves so that we can experience the full range of human emotion and human experience
Hmm.
and do it from a compassionate way, and do it in a loving way and empowering way, and not have it derail us and and really take over our lives. So you can have those bad days, you can have those bad thoughts, but you can have them with compassion and understanding that that doesn't have to define you. And there, you can really see the bigger picture of your worth and of yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a perfect segue into self-fulfilling prophecies.
Certainly. Well, one point. So yeah, it absolutely is. I love you said that you started to ask yourself, who do you want to be? And I really love
Hmm.
that, because growth mindset tells us that we can make changes and maybe make directional changes and change course, but that deciding who you want to be, like, hey, if I can change, if I can grow, like, what do I want to grow into? Who do I want to change into? That kind of gives us a destination, and then we can really kind of go to work and use some other tools and things to go to work, being fueled by that by that growth mindset. And you talked about vulnerability, and it made me think, that's really what lays the foundation for, and why the 12-step programs have had the success that they have, or specifically the anonymous groups, and having that chance to finally be a little vulnerable and tell your story in a way that you've never told it before, around a group of people that you're comfortable with, and that won't judge you for the things that you're saying. But that ability to be vulnerable starts to erode some of that shame and some of that guilt, and help you begin to process in a healthy way many of those things that have been eating away at your self-esteem and sense of worth for so long. Um, and you mentioned judging of others, and it's constant. People are going to judge us. If we define ourselves by their judgment, then we're giving our power, our locus of control, over to another person. Where if we define ourselves by our own judgment of ourselves, by our growth mindset, by positive judgments of us, realizing that we're on a learner's path, not just defined as the experiences that we've had in the past, then we're taking back that control, that empowerment, and we are in control of our lives. And that's where I want to be. Like, I want my life to be controlled by me as much as I can, not by those things that are beyond my control, because then you'll never, experience the life that you want.
Right.
Yeah. On self-fulfilling prophecies, and there's a little bit more in your worksheet about, excuse me, self-fulfilling prophecies. But if you're not familiar with the concept, really what a self-fulfilling prophecy is an idea or a belief that we have that either directly or indirectly creates that result. So, for example, I guess the way that it's defined, I think in your worksheet says it's a prediction that directly or indirectly causes itself to become true. And the very terms of the prophecy due to positive feedback between belief and behavior. So how this would show out in your life is if you have a belief that you are bad at something or that you're going to fail at something, then you're going to take actions that that you would if you thought that you were going to fail at it. One way that fixed mindsets has shown up in my life was when I was younger, I used to excel at math and sciences. I liked math and sciences. I excelled at math and sciences, and I bought into what I think is one of the biggest conspiracies around fixed or growth mindset. This whole idea that a person is right-brained or left-brained, and not, and I would agree that maybe some people have a greater aptitude in things that are more, analytical or scientific in nature, and other people might have a greater aptitude for the artistic side of themselves, their artistic expression. But I really bought into this thought that, like, oh, if I'm good at this, then I can only be good at that. So it became a self-fulfilling prophecy in my life, because then I would not apply myself at all in the arts, in English, in reading, in expressing myself. And I just thought, like, hey, I'll never be a good reader. That's fine. I'll never be a good artist. That's fine. I'll never be able to write very well. That's fine. I'm just going to focus on this area that I'm good at. And because I didn't make that effort in those things that I didn't thrive at right away, then those talents and those skills and those abilities atrophied. So I actually became somebody who for a very long period of time could not write very well, could not speak very well, could not read very well, and had no ability to express myself artistically, because I had created that. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. It was a thought that I had that manifest as I thought. So this can work for or against us. If we have we can create self-fulfilling prophecies that we can be great at something, and knowing our ability to change, knowing our ability to improve, knowing the fact that we're empowered with a growth mindset, if we choose to be, we can create those prophecies, or we can create those manifestations in our life. The first time that I flew a plane, the first many lessons of flight training, I was terrible at it. I think I landed a plane, I attempted to land a plane more than 100 times before I could land it without bouncing down the runway. Many people that were standing there watching me would probably call it a crash. I would be more generous and just say I was bouncing down the runway. But I had in my mind that, no, this is something I can figure out. This is something I can do, even though all the evidence suggests that I will never be a good pilot at this time. I believe that I can eventually learn this, that I can eventually be an effective pilot, that I can master these skills that I need to learn. And do so effectively. And because I held that belief, then I applied myself. I put in that extra effort. I spent the extra time in the books, and eventually I became an effective pilot. So I manifest that in my life because I held that, and that prophecy fulfilled itself. So this is such an important thing to be aware of, because we can identify, when we identify those fixed thoughts, those fixed mindset thoughts, that say, like, I am not good at this, or I'll never succeed at that, we need to catch ourselves and realize that, that's not necessarily true. With some growth mindset, with some extra effort, with some training, if it's something that's important to us, then, certainly we can make improvements, and that we don't have to define what our outcome is. If it's not important to you, then by all means, don't spend the extra effort and the time in doing it. And if you just want to accept the fact that that you're not good at something, maybe accept the fact that I'm not a good painter, well, and I don't care, well, that's fine, then I'll live by that definition. But if it's something that's important to you for any reason, you can create that ultimate outcome, or that manifestation. So now I'm rambling. Do you have any thoughts to say about self-fulfilling prophecies? And let me just remind anybody that's watching, please drop any comments, any questions, anything that you'd like us to talk about, because we want to really turn this conversation to you in a couple of minutes and answer any questions that you have, any things that are showing up in your life. And if you want to just throw a question out there and not be attributed to you, then just say that in the comments, and we'll leave your name out of it, or you can send an email or something, and we can kind of read it privately. And and address it or talk about the issue. But please do. So what
Yeah.
do you think about self-fulfilling prophecies? And do you have any examples of that showing up in your life?
Yes, I do, of course. I think the biggest thing, so one of my favorite quotes, so Robert Merton is the sociologist that came up with self-fulfilling prophecies. And one of my favorite quotes by him, he calls it a reign of error, which I love so much, a reign of error, because we just perpetuate, and I think the most important message with self-fulfilling prophecies is that our thoughts drive our behavior. And we don't think they do. We don't realize how much they do, but they do. Our thoughts drive our choices. They drive our behavior, and our behavior drives results. And then our results convince us that our thoughts were correct to begin with.
Sure.
So, it's this, it can either be it can be a great cycle, or it can be a self-defeating cycle. And, I've definitely had a lot of examples in my life of it being a self-defeating cycle. One of the biggest places this shows up for me a lot is really codependency issues. So this idea that I need to take care of the entire universe because the universe is not capable without me.
Sure.
And so, I've set up many situations in my life where I have this thought that nobody else can take care of this. Nobody else in my life is going to do what they're supposed to do, or they're not going to do it the way they should be doing it. They're not going to do it as quickly as they should be doing it, whatever it is, whether it's big or small things. And so then I'll do it. I will do it, and I will not give them a chance, because I'm convinced already that I need to be the one that does it all. And then I'll feel super resentful and frustrated and exhausted because I've done everything. I'm over functioning for others. And then those others I didn't even give them the space to learn or grow or like maybe figure something out on their own, which only convinces me that they're not capable of it, which makes me
Sure.
continue to do it. And that's a cycle that I spent a really long time in, and I can easily go back there. Like if I don't, if I'm not careful and I don't listen to, and I can't even describe, one of my, one of the flags for me of what's going on when I can recognize what's going on in my head is when I hear myself start saying, "Ooh, it must be nice. Must be nice. Must be nice to go through life and not have to do, blah, blah, blah. It must be nice to be driving and be oblivious to all the drivers that are around." Like I have my must be nice voice when that comes out. That's how I know, like, oh, whoa, like something's going on here. You're over functioning again.
Sure.
And so that's a big one for me that came up, that came up a lot. And when this, this topic of self-fulfilling prophecy, one of the most important, I think, examples in recovery of this is that they're just starting to, as I said, this research is really new. It's baby research as it relates to this kind of stuff in recovery. But there was an interesting study that looked at people, I believe it was coming out of, alcoholic, people struggling with alcoholism coming out of rehab at 6 months out, and looked at who were the people of that group when they controlled for all these other circumstances, who were the people most likely to relapse 6 months out. And they found that the people that were the most likely to relapse were the people that subscribed the most heavily to this idea that they had a chronic relapsing disease. So what that tells me is that the way we view ourselves matters, and the way we talk to ourselves matters. Our words matter, our thoughts are words, and they matter, right? Because we hear our thoughts as words in our head. So, if those people are
that, like, you're permanently defective and there's permanently something that's going to have dominion over you and control over you and permanently define you, then it ends up being fulfilling itself.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And,
Wow.
I see a lot of times with clients that have gone through extreme, trauma and just horrible. And I mean, oh my gosh, right now this is very fresh for everybody, right? The idea of healing from trauma, and a lot of people I think are triggered and things like that. And so I think and this is again another interesting thing from research that to me is always encouraging, and I try to share this because most people don't hear about this stuff because of course they don't talk about this stuff, out there. But in terms of talking about post-traumatic growth, which I know I'm sort of on a tangent, but it ties into mindset for me.
You can see up the next topic. That'd be a great topic for another video.
Yeah,
Please continue.
exactly.
We'll kind of whet everybody's interest for the next one.
Yeah, exactly. We'll do more on post-traumatic growth because it's one of my favorite topics. But So for everybody, post-traumatic growth is the idea not just of bouncing back from adversity to where you started, but it's actually bouncing forward. So it's coming away from trauma way better than you could have ever expected, having more fulfilled life, having more better relationships, having, whatever, all these improved things. And when they look at the people that are not everybody experiences post-traumatic growth, but when they look at the people that are the most likely to experience post-traumatic growth, they're the people that started out the least resilient. So the way that I interpret that is that if you can go to the depths of low, then you can go to the heights of high.
Sure.
And so for anybody out there that doesn't feel like they've always been super resilient or has really gone to some low places, the good news is that that doesn't at all mean that you're not capable of going to really high places. In fact, you're more likely to experience that. And to me, where it plays into mindset is how you think about your story as it relates to the fact that all these things have happened to you. It matters. It plays
sort of the context of which you look at the events that have happened in your life. And I think that really speaks to this fixed and growth mindset. Some of the research I've read says that for people that experience a trauma and then experience post-traumatic stress disorder, post-traumatic stress, they look at the event that it happened to them. And it doesn't have to be a major trauma, but like any trauma or, any minor failure in our life, if we look at that failure happened to me, then we experience more of that trauma. But if we look at that event, whether it's a major traumatic event or whether it's a really small failure, a day-to-day failure, and we think, wow, that event happened for me, and we look at the ways that we've strengthened or grown or the new awareness that we've had or the new skills that we've developed or the greater compassion that we have, and we can realize or we can identify a certain thing that happened for us, then it really fuels that post-traumatic growth and our ability to transmute something that could be just horrendous and terrible in our life, but transmute it for something that can be empowering and good.
Exactly. Yes.
If anybody has any comments, so we've been going for about 40 minutes now, and we really want to answer any questions, or if you have just any points of discussion that you want to throw out there, you can drop them in the comments. I'm not seeing anything come up, so there might be a little bit of lag on my end. Are you seeing any comments come up on your end, Monica?
I am not. I think we're just stunning people with this really important information. So
I believe that's exactly what it is. I'm sure of it. So really, just to recap, we talked about mindset and realizing that our mindset is what determines our behaviors, it determines our actions, it determines the way that we respond to things in life, and really determines the way that that our life experience. It defines our life experience. We can have fixed mindset, which just means that we identify ourselves by the experiences that we've had. If we have a failure, we identify ourselves as a failure. If we have a success, we identify ourselves as successful or talented in that area of our life. Or we can have a growth mindset, which says that the events or circumstances that happen in our life, those events that we face, if we face a failure, then that's a failure that happened for us, and that's something that we can learn from. It doesn't define us individually as a failure, but it just says that specific event was a failure. And when we have these mindsets, then we develop these self-fulfilling prophecies in our life. Because when we act from a certain place or a certain mindset, if we think that we are fixed in our skills or fixed in nature in one area of our life, then we're going to act accordingly. If we don't think that we're good at something, we're not going to put in a lot of effort and a lot of talent if we don't think that we can improve. If we don't put in a lot of effort and a lot of talent, then we are not going to improve, and we'll see that prophecy fulfilled in our life. Monica pointed out a really important thing, that we can have fixed and growth mindsets in different areas of our life. I can be a fixed mindset in one area of my life. For a long time, I was a fixed mindset and thought that I could never be a good reader, a good writer, artistically inclined. But I had a growth mindset in other areas of my life. So even though you might carry this growth mindset and this empowering mindset in one area of your life, you got to look at multiple areas of your life. Look at what's holding you back. Look at what your stresses are. Look at what those hot button things are that pop up, your triggers, and see how they're affecting you. Recognize how they're affecting you. Yeah. So anything that I missed? I think Carly.
Yeah. Yep. I see from Carly. Thank you, Carly. Yeah. As a family member, is hoping for a bounce forward result. Yeah. And definitely.
which is another whole point of really, what drew me into this topic in this presentation and a lot of the work that I do. So I'd love to empower and help people experience greater success and happiness in their life. But I'm also really drawn to specifically substance abuse and addiction because the stigmas around it just really infuriate me. All the judgment around it that creates these situations for people like really infuriates me. And I see substance abuse, I understand it and addiction as a part of the human experience. Like we all do things, we all expose ourselves to things that are addictive in nature. Some people, their lives are defined by it or become defined by it for a period of time, and they face more severe consequences than others. But they're not doing anything that's any different. For anybody that's ever watched TV or played with a smartphone or scratched off a scratch off ticket or gone gambling or drank some alcohol or consumed sugar or consumed caffeine or smoked a cigarette. These are all addictive things. These are all things that we put into our body, and we do it for a number of reasons, but we all do it for the same thing. We do it to escape, we do it to avoid, we do it to numb some feelings inside of us, or we do it to celebrate something that's going well. Maybe we want to celebrate a win, so we do it by indulging in something. But all these things are done for the same reason. Somebody who's an addict or somebody who's abusing something, they're doing the same. They're doing things for the same reason that everybody else is. So, that's one thing that infuriates me the most is like the lack of compassion for that, lack of understanding for people that are struggling with substance abuse or addiction. Because I see how much it holds them back. If all the friends and family members or people in the community are defining somebody as a certain way and have this certain thought on somebody, that's what fuels the fixed mindset for that person that's struggling. There's a quote I heard last night in a documentary I was watching. It's really true. Somebody who's abusing substances or an addict, they're not a bad person trying to act right or trying to act good. They're a sick person who's trying to get well or trying to get better. So it's no different than people that are struggling with other ailments or other diseases. They're just trying to get better. So I'm sorry to go off on that tangent, but to my point was that not only is this webinar and a lot of the work that we do for those people that can use it in their own life because they're struggling with substance abuse or addiction, but it's also just to create awareness for other people. Like, this is what it's like, living in that perspective. This is what that person's going through. If somebody somebody is struggling in that area, they have the ability to grow. They have the ability to change. Their actions of yesterday don't have to define their future. They do have the ability to grow and develop new skills and develop new talents and be defined as a different person in the future. That is a possibility. So they don't always need to be thought of in a certain context. So just got on the soapbox for a minute there, but
thank you for that. And I think I would add, just to that point about as a family member, I mean, it is and even based on my personal experience, there are a few things more painful than watching someone you love suffer and being powerless over their suffering, and having no clue how long the journey is going to last and what it's going to look like and the roller coaster ride that it's going to include, and really the struggle of detaching from that because it impacts you. And
absolutely.
I always say that if love or logic were enough to control addiction, then we wouldn't have it, because behind every person that struggles, there's many people who love them. And I've learned the hard way, there's absolutely no logic to it. I mean, you can sit around all day trying to think to yourself, well, that doesn't make sense, because none of it makes sense.
Right.
And I think in terms of people in my life who've struggled with it and having to watch, figure out what I have control over and what I don't, and kind of where my boundaries are with that. That's been a 10-year journey in and of itself for me, to try to sort through, and I continue to sort through, but I constantly remind myself that I don't know, I just can't possibly know what other people need to experience and how long they need to experience it in order to really get where they need to go and to learn what they need to learn. And the biggest thing, I think about, and I know this example is used a lot, but the idea of trying to, be nice and let a butterfly out of the cocoon, that's because you see it struggling, and then it dies because it needed the struggle, right? It needed to build that muscle, and it needed to learn, right? So it's hard. I mean, there's no way around that. As a family member, it is torturous. And that struggle is very real. So I definitely
it affects everybody, and and it does create a lot of pain and suffering, not just for everybody that's involved and everybody that knows about it. It can be very painful to see somebody that you love struggle with that, and obviously get caught up in the consequences and have a lot of pain come from those situations. But one thing, it's when you're dealing with a loved one, it's, it's their journey that they're going through, and you don't have control over that. We have control over our own actions and our own responses to things that happen in our life, but we can't control somebody else. And nor should we. Like their life is intended to go down a certain path, and they're supposed to have certain experiences to gain certain things from them. Maybe it's not things that we wish that they would have to go through and experience, especially for a loved one. Like, we don't want them to have to experience pain, but if pain is what brings growth and what brings the possibility for a better future, then yeah, why would you take that opportunity for a better future away from them by taking away that pain? But for all the things that we can understand, there are a lot of things that just don't make sense, and they don't have to make sense, and we can still make a big impact and make a big difference with it. And I think coming from understanding, coming from love, coming from compassion, that's the best that we can do and best that we can hope to do in dealing with our own issues and helping other people deal with some of the consequences that they face. On the worksheet, there is some suggested questions that you can go through for yourself to help develop your growth mindset, and then also ways that you can use those questions and that insight to help other people. So if you do have a loved one, or if you are, if you know somebody else that you're going through a program with, or a sponsor or a sponsee, you can use some of this information to really help them. So I don't know, you have any parting shots, or if you could just enlighten us, tell us a little bit more about your work. So one of the things I first learned about you was the twist on the 12-step program that you created, and that's something that you've been working towards. So what can you say about that? And then if you would, just anybody that wanted to connect with you, what's a good way they could connect if they wanted to reach out to you for some more information?
Sure, yeah. The Twist on the 12-Step program, it's a 12-week program that I developed, and it's basically a well-being version of the traditional 12 steps of recovery. And I sort of try to say that it's the flip side of the 12 steps. And the best example of that is, for step one, where, traditionally people are looking at admitting powerlessness and acknowledging unmanageability in their life. My flip side of that is looking at what we have power over. So we look at neuroplasticity research, the power to rewire our brain. We look at epigenetics, and we look at mindset. Epigenetics is, emerging research around the idea that they're finding that what genes get expressed often have to do with our perception of our world and our feelings and thoughts. They're not just predetermined. I mean, we are not just our blueprint. We actually can have the power to turn genes on and off based on our perception. So, that first module as an example, it's what are all the things we have power over based on research. So participants can go through the program, and each module they'll learn a different area of well-being research or resilience, research, and get a workbook and have tools and kind of, I would say that it's great for people who've already done 12-step work and they want to kind of continue on, or for people who are looking for an alternative, because not everybody, 12 steps doesn't work for everybody. They're not everybody's, it's one tool. It's so it's an option for either
Great
person.
Tool, very effective tool for everybody that works for it. I mean, it's fantastic, but yeah, certainly there's some space there for alternative approaches to help. Everybody deserves to have something that works for them and that will help them. So that's fantastic. And where do people find more about that?
Clearmindproject.com is my website. So there's information about it on there, and you can get a hold of me on there, Monica@clearmindproject.com, or you can just go to the website.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for that. And thank you once again for, I don't see any more questions coming in. Thank you once again for joining me tonight. I'm really excited to have completed our first of many joint live webinars presentations. And I'm certainly looking forward to the next one.